looking forward to speaking to her alongside Denise. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to the platform on the Quincy's Comedy Lounge radio program, Miss Halima Khan is in the building when she comes in. Miss Halima Khan. Let's use her.
Hi, thank you, Denise. Thank you, Quincy, for having me. I've been so excited about this interview. Unfortunately, I was really ill last week and I missed the slot. But it's good to be on with you guys. I'm just really excited, actually, just to have a chat with you guys. So thank you for the introduction. I just think that for your viewership, I should give a bit more background on who I am. I used to work for the Labour Party as an investigations and governance officer. So how I really explain that to people that aren't inside the belly of the beast is essentially that we operated kind of like the deep state unit, where, you know, the unit, what we were doing was essentially just what I'd like to be frank and open is mass surveilling on social medias and looking at, you know, membership conduct, but it was never really conduct of individuals that are corrupt. It was entirely designed to suppress a certain type of speech on certain issues.
One second, Halima, right? Because I want people to really take in what you did at the Labour Party, but before the Labour Party, I mean, you got a life anyway. So it was leading up to before you became a member of the Labour Party. What was Halima? Is that how you pronounce your name, Halima?
Halima, yeah.
So what led you into politics in the first place before we go down that road and introduce me?
No, thank you. I appreciate that people want to know me outside of politics. It's nice. We want to know
who you are first. I mean, we want to know who you are first because you're a person. You rave like everybody else. You party like everybody else. You got a life.
Yeah. Thank you. So, you know, I studied neuroscience at university, but not because I really wanted to study it. It was more my parents, you know, being an Asian girl, like, you know, no, become a doctor, become a lawyer, that kind of stuff. So I kind of had to do something scientific, which I hated. I really hated it. I mean, I found the subject interesting, but, you know, my heart wasn't in it. So at the same time of me being at uni, I was also going to drama school. So I actually went to identity drama school after meeting John Boyega on sets of Star Wars. So it was John Boyega that told me, Halima, just go to identity drama school, you know, if you don't have, because, you know, again, with drama school, you have to be of a certain class to have access to those kind of things. And then at that stage, when I was like in my 20s, you know, how do I start, basically? So I went to drama school. Then I found issues in the drama schools as well. You know, when you're an ethnic minority woman, you know, when you're a Black woman or an Asian woman or whatever, there is a thing called the casting couch. It really thrives, especially in London. And I think a lot of, and I hope one day in the future I can talk about these things, but a lot of my Black and brown female friends have experienced horrendous things with just trying to get into acting. And, you know, that kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, my experience on that. And I kind of just walked away because I kept getting typecasted into certain roles. And I think, you know, these kind of instances really did lead me to politics, even though at that time I didn't know it, because I was always just angry at why are there always these kind of barriers in every type of career path, or, you know, the typecasting of it all. Why can't I just play a regular girl? Why do I have to play a girl in a hijab, or, like, you know, certain agendas? And that's what I kept on finding myself. So I walked away. Away. And then after I finished university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, like, because I wasn't happy. I'm a very creative person. I make music, I spit bars, I do like other things. So I wasn't happy because I didn't have any of the qualifications to go into a creative field or the experience or anything like that. So what I was doing was, you know, I needed money. I was broke. So I was just going to agencies and giving my CV and asking, you know, just give me any job. And then I found myself working as an admin for the NHS, worked in social services, worked in Oxford Brookes, but nothing really satisfied me. So I'd only stay in these jobs for like 6 months at a time. Because again, when I saw the glass ceilings, I just wanted to smash everything. And if I couldn't smash it, then okay, on to the next one. I'll just leave because I couldn't see career progression or, you know, getting to a position where we can change the things that are wrong. And I think that's always been kind of my mindset, where I'm like, you know, if I see wrong, I want to change it. But if I don't have the powers to change it, then I need to find a way. I need to either remove myself from that situation, because otherwise I'm going to just get frustrated and just become really ill, or, you know, just move from that situation, find somewhere else where I can be of value. And then that led me into politics, basically.
So look,
yeah.
so yes, it led you into politics. And there's so much I want to speak to you about, but obviously there's only a short period of time, and I'll gladly invite you back, because one of the things when it comes to politicians or MPs or councillors, no one knows who they are. They know what rhetoric they deliver, and they very much make it, I need to deliver this message, but no one knows who they are. And unfortunately, what we see, like, we know who Nigel Farage is, we know who Boris Johnson are, we know who the Trumps are, because they make sure they bring that personality out, even though their policies are very much of all over the place, but we know that they are governed and pushed in a direction, but personalities sell, unfortunately, and not policies. So you are representing Bow and Stratford, or Stratford and Bow. Yeah. What made you choose that area?
So, you know, when I was working in the Labour Party, I worked under Corbyn and Starmer, right? And I was trained by you know, very powerful figures on both the left and the right. So I was trained to have the mindset of the left under Corbyn, then the mindset of the right under Starmer. So I was very much exposed to, you know, how both sides work in this game of politics and all of that. And I think because I was such a wild card, I didn't, you know, on my way to the interview, I just Googled, how do you become an MP? How many members of parliament are there? What is the structures of the Labour Party? I didn't know a thing, actually, until I got to my interview. And, you know, I just spoke the truth throughout my interview. One of the things that the Labour Party asked me, you know, if I was a member, and I said, you know, I'm not a member because I don't necessarily believe in the Labour Party or Corbyn being a force to change. I'm here to stop another Tony Blair. So that was the mission, that my personal mission that I felt that I had, because, you know, we knew what the effects of having Tony Blair was, especially for, you know, minority communities and, you know, the working class, you know, people who want an education, who now have to pay tuition fees that are sky high, and we just get put off by getting degrees, whereas the elder generation didn't. Now, there was a time in my career in 2021 where I was exposed to high levels of corruption. I mean, it was from the very beginning, but I came across this dossier that I was leading. So I was the lead investigator for the London region. And I was leading this investigation into the members of Newham. Now, in the dossier that was provided was horrendous bits of information about all ethnic minorities. Basically, every ethnic minority in Newham was being monitored, right? I had a breakdown of graphs of what each ethnic minority, how many spoke a certain dialect, you know, with specific members that were monitored, where they were taking their kids to school, where they were parking their cars, and all of these things. It was a mass surveillance dossier, essentially. So I said to my director at that time, I said, you know, I said to the management, I said, this needs to go to the police. This is a serious safeguarding issue. I'm not touching this, basically. Then I was removed from the case. Then there was a number of other cases that I was working on, very high profile cases. And, you know, I'm very excited to see Martin Forde come on later as well, that I can touch on afterwards. But essentially, a number of key figures who are still in the Labour Party, who still hold council seats, were part of this dossier and part of signing off this dossier. So there are people in power that are okay with us being mass surveilled in Newham. So I'm not from Newham, But the reason why I stood in Newham is to hold those individuals to account, to tell the people this is what the Labour Party is doing to you. Newham was the hardest hit by COVID, and with the highest rates of COVID deaths in the entire country, which by and large means in Europe, right? So when I was in the Labour Party, where we're supposed to be opposition to the government, and I was trying to raise the voice of the victims and trying to, make an issue of, why is this the case? We need to have a position. We need to look at the people who have been the hardest hit. It was just on deaf ears. And for me, that was a serious issue that, when the Labour Party would publicly say that, when the Labour Party would publicly say they're in opposition, but then throughout the whole COVID pandemic, they weren't in opposition for anything. Do you know what I mean? So we as a community, and especially people in Newham and Tower Hamlets, need answers. It doesn't make sense that the city is a stone's throw away from Canary Wharf. My constituency is a stone's throw away from Canary Wharf, but majority of 48% of the children in Tower Hamlets live below the poverty line, and 44% of the children in Newham live below the poverty line. It's one of the poorest boroughs in the entire country, but nobody's speaking to them. So that's why, I decided to stand in Stratford and Bow, because, again, I know where the corruption lies, and I can't bear to see the people still under this rule, which is oppressing them. Because, I think people's general perception of politics is that, an MP has more powers than they do, right? Really and truly, actually, all the powers are in the councils. They decide where your money is allocated. They decide, where the funds should go and in what services and stuff like that. So, our MPs, if they're of the same party, they turn a blind eye to the crimes of the councils, right? Whereas for me, I will definitely hold them to account. I already am in my own personal capacity with my legal cases, my employment tribunal cases. So for me, I didn't see anybody that was actually going to go and stand up for those people in that area. So that's why I chose Stratford and Bow.
All right, so look, go on, Denise.
Sorry. Hi, Halima. Thank you so much for coming on. We were so looking forward to you last week, but we understand you weren't very well. But I'm sure you're much better now. So thanks for coming.
Trying.
Yeah, good. Halima, are you part of just for clarification? There's so much stuff I've been reading and trying to get my head around. So obviously, I saw the Al Jazeera film, which was very useful, and we shared it. So I'm hoping that people will have a bit of understanding before they come on in terms of what's actually happened, some background. Are you, in terms of the whistleblower, are you part of that whistleblower, the 5 people that whistleblowed? Are you part of that or not?
No, okay. I'm not part of them. No. So, the 5 people that are now being called whistleblowers.
Yes.
Okay. The 5 people that are now being called whistleblowers, when the leaked report came out, they weren't called whistleblowers. They were called, people who had, their case was built around, we didn't leak it. So now that the phraseology has become whistleblower, after the whistleblower came out publicly and decided to stand, there is something a bit more, shadowy going on that I would have to sit here for hours to try and explain.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
On that. Okay. But in terms of those individuals, I was in the same unit when they were writing the leaked report. Right. I was there in the same time, the same unit. Now, the 5 that wrote it were all white people. There was ethnic minorities in the office, in the team. We weren't told what was going on. We were just sat there, been looking around, looking for our team members. They had vanished. We weren't told where they were. And we weren't included until the leaked report released. Then the onus came on us, ethnic minority staff, as chair of the BAME Staff Network and secretary of the BAME Staff Network, to start fighting Starmer while the 5 just vanished. So
right. Well, I'm glad that you confirmed that. This is why, as much as we do research, there's nothing. This is the best thing, having the person in front of us so you can actually say that for yourself, because the way that it's reported in the media, you think it's you that you were part of. So thank you for clearing that point up. So that's the only question I want to ask.
No, thank you, Denise. Thank you for asking. It's an important question, because a lot of people have reached out saying, "Oh, I've heard your case has dropped," and I was like, no, it hasn't. They've got worse. They've got more intense, especially standing up. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Okay. Thanks,
Denise. Martin's in the wings. I just want to bring him on. Yeah, but I just want to say this before you bring him on. Halima, you're familiar with the Forde report?
Of course.
Yeah. For me, it's the point that the guy that Denise is going to introduce us in a moment. It's like, have you ever met?
So I'm so excited for Martin Forde to come on, because I think there's a lot that I can say that he'd also be very surprised with in terms of how BME staff were treated. We never got the opportunity to meet it, despite us trying to get opportunities to meet him and speak to him directly. Right. So the middle people were blocking us as the BAME staff from speaking to Martin Forde directly. So yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to put this out, Lisa. I think it's very important we say this here.
Yeah.
Look, we're having a conversation, you know what I mean? And obviously, we respect the law, yeah, and we do not want anything to happen untowards, that anything liable or anything like that. But clearly, Martin's the guy to rectify that, and obviously not put himself in trouble, and yourself, Halima.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And just before Martin comes on, I think I might have told him, I sent him a voice note just to say that I spoke to a councillor, a Labour councillor, just somebody, because I know her, and asked her about the report. And she was like horrified that I'd asked her anything about the report. I got a phone call from her husband telling me not to call her again about the Forde report.
And one more thing, and I want to keep this real, yeah? The kind of Labour we're dealing with, because it was Grenfell last week, and there was a councillor who's MP representing Labour in the area, and she was one of the women who opposed the ceasefire, but was there literally with a placard talking about the 72 lives in Grenfell, and she got called out. So people are aware that the hypocrisy and the double standards of this particular Labour Party. So I'm gonna leave it to yourself, Denise. Bring in a Belgian friend,
Let's bring on Martin Forde KC. Good morning, Martin.
Hi.
Hi, Martin. Martin's been a guest on our show before. This is the third time I think he's been with us. But this particular occasion, we want to talk about the Forde report, the report that Martin wrote following being asked to do this by Keir Starmer. And the reason why, and there it is, and I have shared the report as much as possible, because my concern is this. A lot of people who I've spoken to know nothing about the Forde report. They haven't heard about it. But can you imagine, I was sitting on a coach with a little old lady from up Huddersfield. She's a librarian. And I mentioned to her the things that we're doing and blah, blah, blah. And she knew about the Forde report in detail. And I was like horrified, not horrified, but what? But unfortunately, people of color, Black people we're not here to tell people in terms of how they choose their politics. This is not what we're about. You know, everybody make their own choice, but it's good that we can be informed so we know what's really going on, and then you make your own decisions. So the reason why I'm so glad that Martin has chosen to join us is that he can actually share the background, the reasons why the Forde report was written, and the outcomes, and what the outcomes are. My only concern, Martin, as I asked you one question. What did Keir Starmer say to you about it? I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there. So
I've never spoken to Keir Starmer about the report.
Oh, that's the bit that still horrifies me.
Yeah.
That you've not had a conversation. So Keir Starmer asked you to write a report, and it's a very long report, and it's a very detailed report, and you have never met with Keir Starmer or anybody on that level to discuss it.
I had a remote meeting with him in the course of writing the report with Angela Rayner and the Black caucus of MPs, including people like Clive Lewis, Diane Abbott, Absana Begum, Kate Ossamore. I'm sorry, I should have said very nice to meet you, Halima, and I hope our paths cross soon. I was listening into what Halima had to say, and all I will say is that it doesn't come as a huge surprise to me that seems to me a real difficulty within the party, which we highlighted, which was that there was a very, very big focus on anti-Semitism for understandable reasons. It was always going to be a bit of an Achilles heel for Jeremy Corbyn, and that's where the right-wing press were always going to attack him, unfortunately. But when we asked members, CLP members and activists to write and tell us that their experiences of the party, so we consulted for about 6 to 8 weeks, we got 1,100 responses. And what disturbed us, and although the report bears my name, I had 3 Labour Party peers working alongside me. Larry Whitty, who'd been General Secretary under Neil Kinnock, Baroness Wilcox, who'd been a Newport Council member, I think, in Wales, or head of the Newport Council for about 30 years, and Baroness Ruth Lister, who's a Nottingham academic. And they're all very, very committed, long-term Labour Party members. And they, like me, were really quite disturbed by emerging themes around sexism and racism. And the Diane Abbott messages in the report revealed both. And we felt very strongly that a party that prides itself on diversity and inclusion should be made aware of the extent of the feeling. And I describe there being a perception. I can't quantify how prevalent this is in the party. You couldn't send a survey to the members and say, are you a racist? Are you a misogynist? Are you homophobic? Are you Islamophobic? And expect an honest answer. But one of the things that we wanted to bring to the attention of the hierarchy was that what we described as the smugness of the left. There's this kind of idea that if I am left of centre in my politics, that racism and sexism, homophobia for the nasty right wing, and I then don't have to examine my attitudes because I'm left wing. But I have no reason to think that racism, Islamophobia, anti-black, Asian homophobia is any less prevalent in the Labour Party than within the general population. Nothing within their structures gives me any confidence that they are paragons of virtue. And I'm not surprised that Halima felt that there were kind of cliques within cliques, because we said that it was very factional. There was no love lost between the leader of the opposition's office and HQ tending to be more right of centre, more Blairite, and Jeremy Corbyn's leader of the opposition's office wanting to change the face of politics, really, make it more grassroots. Whatever you think about that as a policy, I think what disturbed us was that people working within HQ expressed themselves in a way which suggested they weren't very supportive of the leader. And in any other walk of life, if you didn't want to follow your leader, you'd leave, rather than possibly attempt to thwart their intentions. And we put this allegation 6 of the report, we put in lots of examples of comments that we'd had from, women complaining of sexism, Black and Asian members also complaining of racism or being belittled or not achieving promotion. Couldn't become council members or part of the council cabinet, because there's a hierarchy in councils which rather mirrors the Parliamentary Labour Party. And we've recently had Sonia Winifred suspended, and then she resigned because she backed a Green motion for a Gaza ceasefire. She's one of my Lambeth councillors, which became official Labour Party policy 2 days later, but they still suspended her for apparently voting with the Greens, because if you do that, then you're promoting another party. And what we've seen under the current regime is the idea expressed regularly that the Labour Party is a party with a broad church, so it should, look after all its members, left, centre, right. But there's certainly a perception on the left that they're being purged by the right. The NEC who commissioned me to do the report is I would say on the Starmer side of the political divide. And one of the things that concerned us was the idea that you could go to a meeting, say in September of 23, that the organisation is proscribed, so banned by Labour. You mustn't be a member of it in March 24, and they will retrospectively punish you for going to that meeting, which to me is a breach of natural justice, and I know Lord Whitty felt the same. So there were lots of things that troubled us about the day-to-day experiences of real enthusiasts. I mean, young men and women like Halima, who come in with all this, you know, enthusiasm. We know how much Jeremy Corbyn's sparked the young electorate, and I think they felt that they were thwarted at every turn. What I'd say about the alleged conspirators, and Halima was never named as one, give her that reassurance, they were all very much perceived as being Corbyn supporters. So there were three young people whose names were in the public domain. Georgina Robertson, whose father is a very eminent human rights KC who's active for the Labour Party. Laura Murray, whose dad I think is not only a friend of Jeremy Corbyn's, but I can't remember if it's Unison or Unite, but he was, I think, a deputy leader. And then Harry Habel, who did a lot of the drafting. And then you also had Seamus Milne and Carrie Murphy, who were, if you like, in more senior positions, Seamus being the director of communications. And the Labour Party, when they were sued by the people who'd written the WhatsApp messages for allowing their data to get into the public domain, they then sought to say this wasn't the Labour Party, it was the conspirators, so the conspirators should pay you damages. That case settled, I think, on the 6th of June. There are concerns about how much it cost the Labour Party, but it settled on a drop hand. So that case is now over. And the other thing that Halima was talking about was the surveillance attitude. Certainly the Labour files, which I've watched, I think they're 4 parts, do touch upon this idea that there's a degree of control whereby only certain types of people will be seen as acceptable candidates. And there's a real concern that where say, ethnic minority MPs have built large majorities, if they're perceived as being in one faction and then they're disciplined, it might give an opportunity for somebody who seems to be more pro the leadership to be parachuted in, who has no close connection with the area, who hasn't been a councillor, etc. So these are things I think that definitely need airing and need discussing. What happened when the report was published was that it was largely ignored by the press, or what we'd call the legacy press. In fairness to others like Novara Media and people like Adam Bastani, they did actually put a big focus on it in their programs. And Richard Sanders Al Jazeera and Peter Oborne, who's Middle East guy, I also did, a bit of work for. And I would cite the treatment of Diane Abbott as, which I've been quite vociferous about, as being another example where certainly the black electorate feel that a significant member of parliament has not been treated when she offered an apology within hours of what she said. It took 13, 14 months for that to be resolved. Whereas, if you're perhaps perceived as being another part of the faction, you can apologise, as the gentleman did in Rotherham.
That's right.
And there was no issue with him continuing to stand until the Daily Mail revealed even more things that are unacceptable things that he'd said. So there again, I've called it a perception, but I know for activists like Halima and the Labour Party activists, they're very, very disappointed in what they see as a report. A lack of action on my report. I was told I would have an opportunity to meet the working party about implementing the recommendations. That never occurred, which surprised me. And the peers wanted to go as well. And there were some important recommendations we felt around trying to get a more independent disciplinary process. Because if it's independent, then the factions can't accuse each other of manipulating process. But that was always said not to be capable of being done under the existing constitution, whereas our argument would have been, if we had an opportunity to present the argument to the working party, you can bolt a lot of this on to your existing constitution, but it will diminish the ability of the NEC to get involved in process. And of course, that's something the NEC guard politically very jealously.
Martin, don't lose your point. I just wanted to ask you, do you think, I've been spending time reading through this whole thing and it's just mind-blowing, but do you think that your report, what were the expectations of the NEC in terms of what you're going to do? Did you think they thought that you were going to do something that would favor them? What because the very fact that I have tried, I mean, it's 800 odd pages long, yeah, okay, and it's a lot of reading, but my God, is it detailed. But I'm trying to understand the reaction. So I'm looking at the media. It's a bit out there, but it's not really out there. A lot of our people do not know anything about the Forde report. They don't know anything. They can't see it. I have to give a bit of credit to The Voice, because there was some articles in there. They did mention to it. I know I saw it in there, but generally, there wasn't an awful lot out there. What did the NEC expect of the report? What was it? What did they expect of you?
Well, I don't know. So the leaked report was the 860. My report's 138 pages.
Yeah,
but
sorry. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I think the issue in all of these things is that I'm sure I was appointed for the optic, because given that it was around anti-Semitism, then to have a black KC, and there are very few of us, and certainly very few do civil work. A lot of us, my peers do crime, but I do civil work. Because it would then mean that, because there are factions within the Jewish community as well. So you've got JLM, Jewish Labour Movement, who's seen as pro-Starmer, and JVL, Jewish Voices for Labour, who are far more pro-Palestinian, but then they're regarded by JLM as almost Holocaust deniers. So they're huge, the great span of opinion within the Jewish community and those of the Jewish faith anyway. So I guess I was a fairly neutral appointment. There was initial kerfuffle because I think Alf Dubbs, who did wonderful work around immigration and migration, who's of Jewish heritage, wasn't included on the panel. I was never consulted about who my fellow panelists were going to be. Ruth Lister actually does have some Jewish heritage. Larry Whitty was a very wise counsel because he lived through militant tendency, for instance, back in the 80s and 90s. And Debbie Wilcox is just a very, very experienced grassroots, 30-year counsellor who's also an out lesbian. So she's a really interesting character. And I found their support and input absolutely invaluable. So you would have thought that probably that panel had an average age in mid 60s, that they would have been kind of dyed in the wool, just pro-party. But then once we dug deep and saw how shambolic the disciplinary system was, and that's no criticism of Halima, they would run certain words across social media, and if they popped up, then that might cause an investigation. One part of the report described it as trot hunting, and it was all done along very kind of factional lines, and that was a real concern, because I think if you have a membership, as it then was, of about 500,000, then your disciplinary processes should withstand very, very close scrutiny, because people are very committed when they join political parties. They're very passionate. And what I found talking to people is that a lot, particularly the younger cohort, they kind of feel the life's being sucked out of them because nobody listens to them. Nobody likes their activism. So I, for instance, had a lovely Bangladeshi woman, very active grassroots campaigner in the Northwest. And she said, I go to the CLP, that's the Constituent Labour Party, and I say, I can deliver the Bangladeshi female vote. I speak the language, I can get them fired up about politics. And there's a shake of the head and somebody says, it's not how we do things around here, love. And, and they're just dismissed. And that needs to be looked at in a granular fashion.
Yeah. The only reason I asked you that question was just because I've watched so many things, interviews, some with you and other people. Richard Saunders was on one with somebody else, and I can't remember who the person was. And they said, yes, it was fantastic that they got Martin Forde to do this. The son of a printer is a Barbadian, the son of a printer. And that's when I think to myself, what's really behind this? Was it just the optics having a black KC there? Because I can't find hardly any. I want
to bring in Halima, because she's sitting there patient as well. Because Halima, hearing from Martin, what's going through your head?
So first and foremost, I'm so excited to actually be able to communicate with Martin. I've tried so many times because when the leaked report came out, right, it was actually us, the BAME staff, that organized all the meetings to hold Starmer to account to do something. Right. So then we had the diversity inclusion board and all these other things come out of it, including the Forde report. So then, you know, from our perception from the inside, we were first so excited that, you know, when we heard that you were going to lead on the report, but what we were on the inside very skeptical. We were scared. We were like, is it just a face, a front? Is this, you know, what we want to actually just prove that there is a hierarchy of racism? Because my role, I had two roles, right? So I was chair of the BAME network, but I was also in the governance and legal unit. So I saw the external facing racism through the governance and legal unit, and how we were, like I said, surveilling ethnic minorities and, you know, not doing any cases on Islamophobia or anti-Black racism. Actually, it was very hard to do any cases on them because we kept on being told anti-Semitism is the priority, even when there were very serious cases of, you know, direct racism, not involving social media, but, you know, in your face. It was a struggle. It was an uphill struggle trying to get those cases through. So then when the BAME Staff Network organized, and, you know, we started, you know, trying to get my team to bring in submissions, because one of the things that people kind of like don't really realize is that, you know, I started working under the left. So everybody above me was left wingers as well. So everyone in my unit was left wingers. And actually, you know, some segments of the report do reference some of my own personal statements as well. And, you know, the thing that's missing in all of this is that the submissions for the deadline was August 2020, right? That was only 4 months into Starmer coming in. So actually, when the staff members and ethnic minority, Black and brown staff members talk about their experiences, it was no different under the left or the right. You know, we still couldn't get any career progression. We were still being stigmatized. And my experience, you know, was that under the left, I was only supposed to be a victim that's meant to be saved. And I can talk my victimhood rather than being empowered to go and fight or just use, you know, my tools that I have to go and actually make a difference. Now, you know, fast forward to, you know, when we had that feeling, because there was several delays that were unexplained. You know, we kept contacting David Evans, you know, when is the Forde inquiry coming out? When is the Forde report coming out? You know, and there was no explanation for why there were so many delays. And I don't know, Martin, maybe you can add context from your side, but we were very worried. Now, when the war on Gaza happened in 2021, you know, I made a statement because I was, you know, one of the members of the Diversity Inclusion Board with David Evans on the board, who's the General Secretary of the Labour Party. Now, I'd made a statement about my position on Palestine, and I said, you've trained me, you know, you've had you and all of, you know, the other organizations that work with you have trained me on anti-Semitism. I know what it is. I'm here to talk about Palestine. And, you know, that I can't separate myself from the cause. And I know you're not going to change your policy, essentially, but is my job at risk? And then he said, I'll have to get back to you on that. So then I knew they were going to maneuver me to push me out, because I was working on a number of things at the same time. And I was consistently calling them out on a number of things. This is under Starmer. So, you know, I was trying to create a mirror definition for anti-Black racism and Islamophobia, which is mirrored to the anti-Semitism one. So when I created a copy, because obviously we were using the anti-Semitism code of conduct to mass expel members, you know, we needed a mirror copy to be on par, right? Again, if there's an issue of hierarchy of racism, how to resolve the hierarchy of racism is to make sure all the other discriminations and types of discriminations are treated the same. So as Denise quite rightly said, The Voice did cover some of the stories as well on the Forde report. And, you know, a good friend of mine, Richard, did interview me as well about the definition of anti-Black racism. So as I said, you know, I mirrored it completely. Now, things that were removed from the definition of the anti-Black racism, which I knew they were going to be removed. I knew they were going to be removed, and it was removed by my white superiors, my white managers. So, you know, it never made it to the Black caucus, the original drafts. It never made it to the Black MPs, right? So where we were internally as a BAME staff were trying to rectify some issues before it even made it to the Black which there was a big wall between us because we were internal, right? We were part of the machine. They removed minimizing racialized police brutality as a form of anti-Black racism. Why? Because Starmer had referred to Black Lives Matter as a moment before. Do you understand?
Remember that.
So, there was a number of issues where, even gendered anti-Black racism, misogynoir, right? Those things and aspects were removed from the definition as well. So these are things that would have helped protect, the things that we've seen that's happened to Diane, for example, recently, but they didn't want those changes. Now, another thing that, when I was still in the Labour Party when we were given the Organised to Win plan. So how they're going to organize to win this election, 2024. And this is why, as much as I really want to relax and not get in the mess of all of this politics, but I've had to take a stand because there's so much wealth and knowledge that needs to be passed on. And if it's not about me winning or losing, but it's about delivering the message to the people so they understand how the system really works. That's the main priority for me. So when the Organised to Win 2024 plan came out, essentially the Labour Party's plans was just focusing on the red wall, and everything else and all the ethnic minority issues were culture wars. That was essentially the conversations in the office, that we just need to show them that we're doing something, but let's focus on the red wall. And that's where we see now, where we are now. Do we see them talking about Black issues at any of the Labour Party? No, not at all, not once. Nobody's talking about engaging with the Black vote. Nobody's talking about, they talk about Palestine, but they don't talk about Islamophobia. They're not talking about any of these issues, which they were in the last election. They were talking about these issues in the last election, but this election, not a peep. You can't hear them. There's not... can anyone quote me from any of them, from Starmer to Rayner to the other side, talking about issues that impact us? They're avoiding it because their war is the red wall. And that was the plan from the very beginning. So, I'm really grateful that I get to speak to Martin, because even with the Labour files, right, when the Labour files came out, I had to take a great significant risk to ensure that there is a documentary, because again, I had fears. I was scared. I was like, is the Martin Forde report actually going to be what we want it to be? And I'm so grateful that it is. And thank you, Martin, because it gave us so much hope and power.
I want to chip in there, because this is a lot to take in, and I think
that's a lot.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No,
Why trying to keep me silent for so long?
No.
Martin mentioned it, and Denise, like, there's a 138 page, is an 800 and some page, and you have to go through it. And as one of our in the chat room, big shout out to Lee Jasper. I was going through the Labour manifesto, and at no point, like Lee has mentioned, race is mentioned in the manifestos. So, Martin, the fact that
it doesn't surprise me though, Quincy. And I'll tell you for why. Because I did a Windrush program on Channel 4 with Rukhsana Ali, who I think is Whip's Cross. And as we were coming out of the studio, she said to me, "Have you considered a career in politics?" And I, in all seriousness, and my father was a printer, he was a member of the NGA, he was a big trade unionist. I said, "For which party?" And she said, "Labour, of course." And I said, "Well, Miliband whipped the Labour Party into abstention on the third reading of the 2014 Theresa May Hostile Environment Bill." And what I turned around to her and said was, what that demonstrates to me is that you were warned that cranking up the hostile environment would disproportionately affect the Black and Asian Commonwealth. But the reason that you didn't want to oppose it was because you didn't want to be seen to the white majority as supporting anything that might appear to be pro-migrant. And I think that's the real fear. I mean, the press are so dishonest. The focus is on 30,000 people making it across the channel, most of whom are fleeing war, persecution and famine, something like 80% of whom under our current systems would automatically be granted asylum. 150,000 Hong Kong Chinese and 150,000 Ukrainians were part of the legal migration figure. Then the other 300,000 were people that employers here wanted, often at cheaper rates, or to fulfill positions that the white British population have made it quite clear they do not want to fulfill. You know, if they're not going to work for minimum wage, and they're not going to go, you know, be hospital porters and cleaners, and that's not what they aspire to. So most of those low-paid jobs are done by ethnic minorities. And I think that what I ended up saying to her, well, look, when you will stand up to those people who are anti-immigration, anti-migration, say that the whole cause of the woes of Britain is the brown people. It's not about inefficient government. It's not about bankers' bonuses. It's not about obscene amounts of money that are paid to a very few individuals. It's all about those, you know, those hardworking brown people. It's all their fault, and it's a distraction. And I'm afraid that I feel that there are elements of the white working class who've fallen for that, because the right-wing political parties are not in favour of the white working class. I mean, they're completely deluded if they think that they've got their interests at heart, because they haven't. But the disappointing thing is that Labour will not take a strong stance on either the positive aspects of migration. We pay more tax than we take out. The wonderful achievements of members of our migrant population. The fact that, you know, chicken tikka masala is the most popular meal, takeaway meal in this country. I mean, there are lots of positive, you know, the music, the reggae, the soul, Bhangra, the children, you know, running around supporting Diwali. All these sorts of things are seen as but they don't get behind any of that current leadership. Yeah. And we saw it both. We saw it with Jacqueline McKenzie, who was working for them for free, who was roundly abused for doing her job as a lawyer. And who came to her defence? Dominic Grieve, a Tory, you know, a barrister. I don't share his politics, but I have a lot of respect for him as an individual. But not a peep from the leader of the Labour Party in support of Jacqueline, who was being told, because she does immigration work, you know, I hope there's some refugees, you know, bodies washing up on your lawn. We'll be watching you. And I just felt there was a missed opportunity to say to this committed Labour Party member who was working for them on their race disparity programme, you know, we'll look after you. And it was the same with Diane. I felt that because she gets more abuse than any other MP, that was the time for the Labour Party to feel protective of her, wrap their arms around her, and not leave her dangling for that length of time. So those are my concerns. I don't know if they understand the optic. The other thing that I think I'll just say very quickly, if you look at the political history of this country, big government has never really worked for ethnic minorities unless they've made lots of money. And so it should not really come as a surprise to the Labour Party, which claims to be a broad church, that, as Helene was saying at the beginning, Blairism didn't do a lot for ethnic minority people. Thatcherism did even less. The coalition was completely chaotic, and the abolition of tuition fees was a disgrace. I mean, I had a grant to go to university. I wouldn't be a lawyer now. If I was 18 thinking of a career, my parents wouldn't want me to get £60,000 in debt. So that's a huge barrier to social mobility. So it really shouldn't come as a surprise to them that the right of centre Labour policies, and even the left of centre soft conservatives, they would term themselves, policies, haven't benefited our communities. So we want to try something different. And the one thing that's never been tried, and particularly for the youngsters, I think, is a left of centre government, which is why the young were so attracted to Jeremy Corbyn. Now, I get Starmer's view is, I want to play the margins. Where do I need to make gains, in a sense, regardless of whom I leave behind, to win, right? And if that is your focus, and it's purely pragmatic, then you can see from the polls he's doing a good job. But he's also, I'm afraid, upsetting some of his membership because he seems prepared to ignore the benefits of migration, not to have any very prominent pro-multicultural policies, because it's so obvious that he's going for a particular element of the vote. And as I said to Shana Ali, I want somebody to say, we will win without your bigoted racist vote. That would be nice to hear.
So for me, this whole Forde report and all stuff before has made me think very differently about certain matters. I don't see so much. I'm saying this to Martin and to Halima. I don't really see so much that in the Tory party, they're right wing. But in the Labour Party, I see left and right, and it's really clear, that there's left and right in the Labour Party. And I feel that with this next election, July the 4th, I've been speaking to people, and their protest votes are the concern, because they're going reform, to give the Tories a bit of a kick in the teeth, so they're going reform. And when you this morning or yesterday morning, there was the guy he's actually resigned from reform, because only a few years ago he was the one that had said, I think he's the guy that's fighting Kemi, but was going to be fighting Kemi Benedoc's area. He actually said, you know what, we need to vote BNP. This same guy who said that was now part of the Reform Party. I don't think he just changed overnight. That's his view. And the way the media is directing this story, Halima, I'm glad you're here because you've clarified some of the rubbish that I've heard. I'm glad Martin is here because he's clarified some of the rubbish that I've also heard. So I really appreciate it. And I just want people to definitely look out for the report. It's really important that people read this report. And secondly, I think the Labour Files Part 3 in particular, Labour Files Part 3, everybody should watch that.
Yep.
Because I'm tired. I'm surrounded by people who say, well, my mother voted Labour, so I'm going to. You need to start thinking out of the box.
And you know what? I want to say this to Halima and Martin. Look, you are both involved in a very messy arena of the world of politics. Even though you're not a politician, Martin, you are indirectly working alongside. I want to ask you from a humanity point of view, how do you keep sane? when you're deliberately watching, when you're deliberately reading and seeing the BS around you, how do you keep a level head? Let me ask Halima first. Halima, how do you keep a level head, Halima?
You know what? I really struggled after the Labour Files released, and after there's so much I can talk about issues that happened with certain individuals, and most of my issues were always racialized, even after becoming a whistleblower, after coming out in the public. That I struggled. I really struggled. But it was last September, because I'm still fighting my legal case with the Labour Party. Now, I can't afford to fight my case, but I still couldn't accept a settlement. So I decided to legally represent myself. I'm not a lawyer, so I've been learning all of this stuff as I'm going along, just to be an example for people who have bad bosses that, no, we don't have to take a settlement. We continue fighting. We continue fighting even if we don't have anything, we still fight, right? So for me, it has been a struggle. But when I was trying to fight my legal case, I ended up going back into Palestine last September for a friend's wedding. And I just thought, if I'm around my people, it'll re-energize my fight. Then obviously October the 7th happened. And, I suddenly found myself in the middle of a genocide while doing my legal case against the Labour Party as well. And I think, going through that process, I think it really healed my mental health and my capability to actually deal with it. It really strengthened my mind, because until you are in a war zone, and until you see the direct apparatus of the occupation and you're up against them directly, everything that I had anxiety over, everything that, I feared or was feeling overwhelmed about the issues that were here kind of washed away. Because when you see death just a hand, arm's length away or a stone's throw away, and, all these things that's happening in Palestine, it really, I don't think had I not gone back and experienced all of that, I'd be here standing still fighting. And that's what's helped my case and why I'm still here and why I'm still fighting.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go across. Please, if you're listening on the FM, come across to Quincy Presents. And we're talking to Halima Khan and Martin Forde. Martin, what Halima did, she done what Dave Chappelle did, and she went back to her roots, so to speak, and left. So, I just want to know, how do you keep sane when you're amongst all of it?
I'm not on social media, but I know, for the younger generation, that's very important. I was made aware of certain things that have been said about me on social media by a colleague, and I said, well, the problem is that because a lot of people assume that because I've got these silly initials after my name, I must have been a complete sellout from start to finish. And I think people thought I'd been selected to do the report on the basis I produced the report that the NEC wanted. And I do value my independence, and I try to be, as honest as I can be, because I don't have a political agenda, around these issues. So if I see something, I'll call it out. But my response was, that if I had been on social media, I would have said, come to my chambers Friday at 6 o'clock and say that to my face, because I don't like being insulted gratuitously. So maybe that's the Bajan in me. So I'm glad I'm not on social media. I obviously have the support of my family, and I have the professional respect of my peers in the day job. So I am not like Halima, immersed in political activism. I have other things that I have to do as well. But if I'm called upon either to explain why I think this report's important, why I think elements of it haven't been taken seriously, or to correct things. So I, for instance, have had a journalist contact me today, and there's been a suggestion made about a communication I had with the party, which is blatantly wrong. And so I'm very happy to go on the record and correct it. Now, what's interesting is Halima saying she recognised some quotes in the report, and this part possibly, explains how things are. There was, as I said, that age span of us doing this report. And one of the things we had to decide very early on was whether we would grant people anonymity or not. And in certain instances, we had to discuss with the many witnesses that we interviewed how they would feel about people in the know being able to recognize who they were. Because of the factual matrix, sometimes it's really difficult. Even if you anonymize somebody who was there at the time will go, that's Harry Hayball, that's Georgina Robertson, that's Seamus Mill. And in fairness to them, they fully accepted that might be a risk. But for the party members who actually wrote in with their submissions, and it sounds like Halima was one, we made a decision very, very early on. We would not quote them by name. We would include the quotes, but we wouldn't attribute them. And the pity of the position is we were really concerned about a social media pylon if we attributed quotes to various party members. And that's appalling. We don't seem to be able to have political debate in a respectful way and agree to disagree. And Gaza has thrown this into stark relief. I have been asking for a long time, and I've spoken to my Jewish colleagues in chambers. I do not wish to cause offence to people of the Jewish faith. How can I express my concern about the loss of life, which is as a result of government policy? It's not the responsibility of all Jewish people, without people thinking that I'm anti-Semitic. And I'm still waiting for an answer. And that's what's got people into a lot of trouble about liking tweets or forwarding tweets. There's also a lot of ignorance out there. People will bandy around terms like Zionism without knowing what it means. I've met rabbis who would consider themselves to be Zionists, but also pro-Palestinian. As I said, it's like you can't say all black people are the same, all Asian people are the same. Not all Jewish people have the same views. And the problem with the Labour Party is it's got two diametrically opposed factions within its midst, JVL and JLM. JVL are feeling very persecuted at the moment. And there seems to be no attempt to find a common ground, and that each has their own idea of the kind of Labour Party that they want to be in power. And as I said, I think the current leader is a bit more pragmatic, because we're coming from a very low base. My focus groups tell me this is the electorate that I need to appeal to, and that's been disappointing for those who want a more socialist, possibly more principled starts in their eyes. But it's the lack of honesty, I think, around changes of direction. And is there really a desire to gain the Black and Asian vote and to have us featuring prominently within politics? Or are we there really, again, as I think I was appointed, mainly for the optic? I think the other thing about my appointment is I sometimes think some of the institutions, and I thought this about the Home Office, they expect me to be so grateful for having achieved what I have. I must automatically be a kind of government official, kind of toe the line individual. They don't really know me at all. But that's not, you know, I've always had a bit of a rebellious streak. I came into the law because I wanted to act for the underdog, not for the people in positions of power. So I think they may well have regretted their decisions at times.
Yeah. And that's why I said to you in the beginning, sorry, go on.
Then I'm saying, like, well, listen, when you become somebody who's doing it for the right, the powers to be want you to be an agent. They want you to side with them. That's the bottom line. And obviously you showed integrity, like Halima. That is who you are and how you behave and what you're going to do. I've got a question here, Denise. I'm going to ask to go. How this is from Vendi. How can people see the report?
Yeah, if you go on the Labour Party website, which I think is labour.org.uk, or you just Google Forde Report Labour Party, within the on the landing page, you scroll down and there's a hyperlink to the report, and you can download that. I checked yesterday; it's still working because there was a concern it might have been taken down already.
I'm going to try and send it in the chat. Oh, I'll send it to you, voice in the head, and then people can see it for themselves. I'll try and send it.
Halima, look, you're still campaigning right now. Obviously, just let people know that how they can contact yourself and what you're doing. And I want to ask you, what's it like working with George Galloway?
So actually, do you know what? Out of all the politicians since whistleblowing, like, you know, I know Martin's mentioned, you know, Georgie, Harry Hayball, and all these people. Since whistleblowing, the only person that actually offered any kind of support and solidarity was George Galloway. So no lefty MP, or no, you know, kind of political figures on the left ever offered any kind of solidarity or support, and the only person that was Galloway. Now that means something. It means that he's consistent, because he was consistently supporting Julian Assange. And you know, one thing that I've experienced through, you know, being inside Labour, then being outside and trying to do the right thing by just telling the people, look, this is what's going on, is that, you know, I do recognize that maybe if I was white and I had a
Is she off? Oh, we seem to have lost Halima. I hope we can get her back.
Sorry, I just got a call and it just disrupted my phone. So yeah, sorry, I do recognize that if I was white and I had a white name and I was more on the side of, you know, not speaking frankly and honestly and just concealing certain things from the realities of how the left treats ethnic minorities and sees us, you know, as just people that can be used as pawns or fronts, you know, that is my experience. That is what I saw, you know. Like I said, if I wasn't so brutally honest about, you know, the issues that we face as minorities, I think I would have gotten a lot more support. So, you know, my experience with Galloway is that actually he has been consistent in, you know, in a space where, you know, I'm not in a very safe space, sticking my head out of the parapet several times to just, you know, get people to hear and listen and really understand how the system works. Really, there's very few people that come out in the public from working so internally and from a machine of, you know, a big establishment party like the Labour Party. Yeah. So, you know, again, like I said, that's been my experience with Galloway, that he's just been very supportive in a place where I didn't really find any support at all. And if anything, I've found more people trying to like block me from speaking to the public. You know, as I said, you know, I wasn't able to communicate with Martin Forde even through Al Jazeera with the Labour files, because obviously Martin Forde did do a Forde response. Now, I did 8 hours of interviewing with Al Al Jazeera, and a lot of things were cut off that are very pivotal. And, you know, even with Martin's response on the Labour files, it would have added to the narrative because we were behind the scenes, and then Martin saw, you know, the aftermath and of all the you know, submissions, and wrote the report on that. It would have added to have the story from the inside as well, to actually explain the story. But I was being blocked.
Yeah.
So
but you were being blocked sort of like legally, because Al Jazeera was told not to speak to you. Okay, Al Jazeera were told to be very careful, because they got letters from lawyers. It didn't go just like a letter from the headquarters. They were told officially not to have certain conversations. So we know these things were happening. So just to say to Martin that you more or less confirmed that for me, that it appeared to me as that you were that optical face. You were that face. They thought, yeah, here's a black man who must be really grateful that he's in a position to do this, and he will produce something that will look favorable to us. They got a big shock. So that's really important, because that is definitely what I believe is the case. And secondly, I'm just going to say that there was something else, Halima. Yeah, both of you, Brian Abbott, the hypocrisy. So for me, I think Lee's trying to call in, just to say the hypocrisy of, if you think about what happened with Diane Abbott in terms of Frank Hester, was it much different from the Labour Party? Did they not say some horrible things about Diane? Yeah, that was in the 160-page report. They were very negative about Diane. So the hypocrisy, you talk about before, is the hypocrisy was there on both sides, and I had a real problem with that. And in a few minutes, hopefully in the chat, there will be the link to the Forde report. There's a link to the Labour files on YouTube. That's me.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to the hours of 1. If you want to make a comment, feel free to comment, or give us a call, 07464 019 07464 is the telephone number to get back to me. What I'm going to arrange is at some point, I think that these conversations need to continue. I'm going to come and see you tonight, Halima, with George, and I think that these conversations, not just online, in venues where we can make the younger generation. Does it make you feel frustrated then from a young perspective? And I'm only talking about me and you because we're young. Yeah, no, yeah. Does it really frustrate you, like not just the politics, but how the elders view the young vote?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think, you know, when did I decide to whistleblow? I was 26 at that time. And then, you know, I just turned 30 last year. So really and truly, I've had such a humongous battle, you know, being a female who's young, you know, to try and speak on these issues. It is very frustrating, it is very difficult. And I think, like I said, the elder generations have this loyalty to the Labour Party that they don't really understand themselves, why they're so loyal to the Labour Party and what the Labour Party actually historically represents. And Denise, thank you for telling me about that. You know, that's the first time I even heard of that, Denise, which is in itself a massive shock. You know, I should be communicated with at the very least. Now, this is what I say when I go back to the lack of respect. If I was a different color, a different race, a different name, perhaps there would be better communication rather than just gaslighted and shoved into the corner where you don't know what on earth is going on in your life and you don't have any access to support and you have to do things on your own to try and access those things. I think that, again, that marries up with my experience as a young person involved in politics. And obviously, like Martin, I relate about the underdog, you know, feeling and, you know, wanting to be the underdog and stand up for the underdogs. That's basically been my entire experience in politics. I don't have mates in high places. I didn't go in with connections. I went in with, you know, a stance that, you know, I'm here for a reason, and I'm going to take my moral stance on it, because I am a believer in God. So for me, it's, you know, I can't transgress against my soul and what I need to do if I betray the people, essentially. Unfortunately, in politics, you don't really find many people like that. You don't find many people that would, you know, again, put people's interests before their own. And I found that, again, like I said, communicating with the elders in the communities and stuff like that, it's been very difficult. But, you know, we are getting towards somewhere, and I'm hoping with this event tonight that, you know, I can just be able to reach the people by them seeing that I'm a real human. I'm not just a politician. I'm not somebody that, you know, even aspired to be.
I'm going to say this to you as well, Halima. After this, and Denise, when we meet up, I want people to know who you are, because we know that you have political views, but I think that it's important for the everyday person to know who is the person representing them. You know what I mean? I've spoken to Martin a couple of times through Denise. You know what I mean? The fact that I know that he's from Barbados and he's a cricket lover, that is like a common ground. So already the next conversation is like, yeah, we can talk on different levels, but we've already got a common denominator in that. I just want to ask you, Martin, have you been following the 2020? You're on mute. You're mute.
Sorry. Yeah, so we're doing all right. Qualified for the Super 8s. So I still don't like seeing Jofra Archer playing for England, but there we are.
That confirms me. I want to ask you just quickly, if you get the choice, watch what England in the final or West Indies in the final? You the same time? Were you watching?
No. I West Indies every time. I mean, I failed the Tebbit test with pride. My father took me to my first test match here when I was 2. And so I was brainwashed into supporting the West Indies. And in fact, I played minor counties level myself. And I would have gone back to the Caribbean to qualify for the West Indies. I'd never have played for England.
I'll tell you this right now, Halima and Denise, yeah, if you think that what's going on with Martin, the Forde report, and in Labour, the left and the right, that's what goes on in the West Indies.
When it comes to cricket.
Yeah. I can tell you. Well, I'm waiting for Lee to give us a call. I know Lee wants to give us a call. You're on mute.
Sorry, I sent you his number in case you haven't got it, because he's been trying to call in. It's just if you look at your WhatsApp, give him a call. He's got he said the Labour Party to Halima and to Martin. The Labour Party is institutionally and systematically racist institution. Do both of you agree or disagree?
Mm-hmm. I'm afraid all our institutions are. I mean, that's how pessimistic I feel. Sometimes it's worse than other times. Sometimes it's just an insensitivity. Sometimes it's more deliberate. But as I said, it's in the report. I think there's a real problem with those that regard themselves as left-leaning, that they don't then say, but do I have attitudes that are wrong? So, you have, your, white party member who might chat to you, but you think, I wonder what would happen if I wanted to date his daughter, or his daughter wanted to date me, and I always worry that I look at the Black Caucus of MPs and I think, well, do they get invited to things? Have they ever been? If Keir is Prime Minister, I wonder about this as well with the Tories. Did Priti Patel get invited to Chequers under Boris, or do you still have those patriarchal cliques that are maintained within every political party? And I fear that
we got Lee in the line. I just want to Lee. I'll ask you a question, Lee.
Yes, fundamentally, the question is whether the Labour Party is systemically.
Hang on, one sec, Lee, because I'm gonna. It's not loud enough. Yeah, ask your question, Lee.
Yeah, just fascinating. The key question for me is fundamentally: is the Labour Party a systemically and institutionally racist organisation? Certainly, from what I've seen from Martin's report and the experience of black and ethnic minority people within the Labour Party, I'd have to say the answer to that question is yes. And therefore, if I think the answer to that question is affirmative, then you really need some powerful piece of legislation in order to fundamentally address that. I wonder if Halima and Martin would agree that the party is actually and needs to own the problem of systemic and institutionalized racism in these right.
All right. Thanks a lot, Halima. I'm gonna put Martin on, and Halima can answer that question. 1 second.
Yeah. So I think.
Go on, Martin.
Yeah, I think what I'd say in answer to what Lee's got to say, it's quite clear to me that there is a problem. I can't quantify it. You know, I can't say 50% of Labour Party members or the PLP are racist, but my concern is about the failure to examine attitudes. And as I said, to assume that if you're left of centre, you don't have to examine these questions. What we got was a lot of evidence, and I know they're a self-selecting group. There'll be the people who've had bad experiences. I get that. But really quite disturbing evidence about people being very politically active and enthusiastic, finding that their comments were ignored, that they weren't included in high-level meetings, they had little or no promotion prospects, they were more likely to be administratively suspended, particularly when they wanted to stand for election as a councillor or as a prospective parliamentary Labour Party candidate. And it just seemed to me there were far too many coincidences of this marginalisation of people, particularly when they start to show ambition. And I mean, I'm very aware, Marcia Hutchinson, who you'll also see on YouTube, relates some awful experiences in the northwest of England when she stood as a woman's officer and the ballot papers were spoiled because racial insults were written on the ballot papers. She wasn't allowed to take them away. She wasn't allowed to photograph them. Somebody in that room had written those comments and there was absolutely no investigation at all. And although what I was really looking at was a relationship between Lotto, HQ, and to some extent the NEC members, the report didn't cover, although I included some quotes in its terms of reference, a detailed kind of drill down into what's happening at CLP level. But I had lots and lots of complaints about what happens at CLP level around homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, Islamophobia, anti-Black, anti-Asian racism. You know, it just struck me that it wasn't a good enough response in a sense to say that was then, this is now, because these were current reports coming in the latter part of the summer of 2020, you know, when the current leader had been imposed for 4 to 5 months. And I'm aware that, you know, there have been working parties established to look at things like race disparity. And that's what Jacqueline McKenzie was working on, disparities in terms of achievement, educational attainment, opportunities, which again, you would expect a left-leaning party to be very, very interested in promoting. But I think there's a real fear that this, as I said, the swing voters, or perhaps those that voted Tory for the first time, that had voted Labour before in the Red Wall, don't want to hear about rights and equality because they already have a very anti-migrant view. And that's the line that I think that Keir Starmer's trying to tread. He doesn't want to alienate anybody at the moment, and you can't please all of the people all of the time. But I think he is losing some people who would like a stronger stance on these issues.
I think we're going to have to wrap it up because we're run out of time soon. But I think that on that note, I just want to say I want to revisit this conversation again, myself and Denise. But I think that we have to start to, I'm going to have these conversations so people can come, invite guests, what Halima's doing tonight, and have these conversations. And we have the power to attract young people. Because I can say this right now, my son who's here, my youngest son, he was aware of politics. Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, as much as I play it and I talk it in my house, but there was something Jeremy Corbyn said that pricked his ears. Yeah, so for me, I think that these conversations are going to continue with the expertise of our Denise and myself, and we're going to put them in platforms and theatres. Would you both be up for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And Martin, just before we leave, I never got the opportunity to actually thank you for everything. And I really, really sincerely from my heart appreciate everything that you did. Like, I'm getting emotional just honestly, it was such a war, and it's been such a war, and like what you did actually is so important. People really need to read it, and hope
Well,
that they-
I said I really feel for you, and you were when you had your run in a very similar age. I mean, Georgina Robertson was only 27 when she was heading up the kind of disciplinary team, and I think you're all conscientious, well motivated, young people. I don't think there's any malice in you, and you want a better world, and that's what the young always feel. They want to change things. They want a fairer, more equal world, and you definitely deserve to be listened to.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for everything. Thank you. You're a hero. You really are. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Look, guys, thanks a lot for taking your time out. I'm only ending it because I want to acknowledge Kevin Campbell, who we sadly lost over the weekend.
Okay.
And not just to speak about him as a footballer, but what he stood for and what this conversation is. I listened, as another you, Denise, I listened to ordinary people from Liverpool, Turkey, Nottingham, speak about Kevin Campbell, a young man born in Brixtonian, who literally done something for people. And I think that when it, I just want to ask, I will ask this and ask you, Denise, as well.
Yeah.
When we these individuals and these people who bring people together, who would you say is the one person, all of us here, all three of you, who is the one person you would say comes to mind has brought people together? Anyone can ask that? Because the first one that came to my head was Muhammad Ali. The first person that came to my head was Muhammad Ali. So Halima, who would you say, family or?
One of the things that I always say, because I was surrounded by Marxists and like all these ists and isms that I just didn't understand. But for me, the person that always politically inspired me, was Malcolm X. And I think his story and his journey has always been something that's so profoundly powerful because he wasn't perfect. But then he perfected his character and he became a leader for us all. So for me, it's always been Malcolm X. That is somebody that's been a pivotal figure in inspiring me in, what kind of a leader would I be and that kind of stuff. So in politics, definitely him.
I suppose for myself, I try to sort of keep it somebody who I met, who I could say I personally got a better understanding of and helped me in terms of my direction of politics was Bernie Grant. Because I had an interest in politics, but not as deep. But when I met Bernie and had two great opportunities having personal conversations with him, I think he inspired me to do some of the things that I did. So yeah, Bernie Grant.
And lastly, you, Martin, who's the person would you say?
Well, I mean, I agree with all of those choices. I mean, Paul Robeson was quite an amazing figure in the States. And certainly for me growing up, the person that kind of got me thinking politically the most, and I think brought the white allies and black people together, was Linton Kwesi Johnson. I mean, I'd recommend anybody to go listen to what he had to say.
He was definitely somebody.
And all those sorts of things. But for me, in my kind of late teens, when I was being regularly stopped and searched, the poetry, but also the anger was really something that I felt and could channel on my little Sony Walkman. For your Halima won't be old enough to remember those.
Oh no, I'm not that young. I definitely had a well,
Yeah. Well, I have two children older than you, so.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've run out of time. We've got 2 minutes left. Please stay on the live. I have to play this tribute to Kevin Campbell because it really touched me, and the fact that the fact that you don't even need to support Arsenal, the teams he played for, but the human being he was and what he represented. So, on that note, I just want to say many thanks to everybody who logged in. We're going to do this again, and I'll see you tonight, Halima. Most definitely.
And please, Martin, I don't know where you are, but please do try and come if you're in London.
Okay.
You in person.
Nice to see you all again.
Thanks, Martin. Appreciate it. Halima, thank you so much, darling.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having me.